Okay, in this short video I want to continue on discussing pegs of postmodernism. And by pegs I mean handles that you can grab a hold of, and when you think about them closely and analyze them, they give you more insight of what postmodernism is. They allow you to try to piece together this whole notion. Now I do want to warn you about this notion that no one can define postmodernism. You know, you should recognize at the very basis that's absurd, because it's a word that doesn't mean chair, and it doesn't mean cat, and it doesn't mean mailbox, so it must mean something. So at the very least you can come up with a general definition. People that tell you, well, it can mean anything you want it to mean, or it doesn't mean something, or you can't define it, they're either being cute, or they're not very logical. So I wouldn't pay much attention to their definition. I might use a little bit of it, but from the get-go, you have to have someone that recognizes, yes, it can be defined. All right. So these are our ways of working towards that definition. Now, I want to talk to you about the notion of self-fashioning. Now, that's not a phrase of my own making. That's coming from a person named Stephen Greenblatt, who has been a very influential literary critic of late. But he does talk a very profitable amount of insight on this notion of self-fashioning. Okay, now to self-fashion something, you have to realize that this assumes something. It assumes that you recognize that there is a you that can be fashioned. Okay, now who does the fashioning? A self standing behind the you. I'll come back to the semi-contradiction of terms here, but there is what this essentially means in practical life is that you recognize that you have an interface in which you meet people at, and it is the body, yes, for most part, but it could also be the screen, like you're meeting me here on the interface of the screen. So here I can dress a certain way, look a certain way down when I'm presenting myself on the screen that I might never be like or look like when I'm, say, somewhere else. So there are outfits and demeanors and visual elements that you can change, or also, superficial habits and verbal tics and ways of speech and talk that you can mix around. And if this is the only place that the people are going to meet you, for all practical purposes, this is all they're going to see of you, this becomes your identity. But see, you never know the person that's standing behind it, right? So as soon as you recognize that there's an actor space, and that you can act a certain way in that space, but down deep inside you can be completely different, okay, then you are becoming comfortable with the notion of self-fashioning. And there are two ways you can do this, all right? One is, well, actually three, but the third way I'll consider as a complete negation of the notion. First, there is the Bart Simpson way. Now I'm thinking of Brian Ott's work. I'm Bart Simpson. Who the hell are you? Okay, so Bart Simpson in that essay picks up the symbols of society, of mainstream society, the power current of society. They reject certain symbols, certain signs. Bart picks them up and puts them on himself. Okay, so he's the rebel, and he's willing to use rebel gestures and symbols to signify himself in opposition against or toward the power channel, the power current of society. So I mean, think about how we work this out today. Most of the mainstream in our culture is going to have a certain view about life, about activity, about goals, okay? And if you're into having goals and into succeeding at the goals and that sort of thing, you probably are not at that moment becoming overwhelmed of the immediacy and the inevitability of death, the eraser of all goals, okay? So, how often when you go online and you go to the entertainment sites, or you go to the business sites, or you go to the world news sites, that you run across people that are actively reminding you of your own mortality and the inevitability of it, the complete erasure and vacuation it applies to your personal achievements, we don't, that main channel of society that is concerned about other things likes to think they're going to live forever, or at least assume that notion. And in terms of this body, but we all realize, who the body will die, it will be interred. All right, so we reject those symbols, though. We don't necessarily want to dress when we go to our interviews, or to our jobs, or our deals, or our therapy sessions, or whatever it is you're getting involved in. We don't want to dress with skulls all around us. But think of that group of our society that has appropriated the black color, the skulls, the death's heads, the death motif. Okay, so they're picking up the symbols that we're throwing away. I don't want to say we. I'm talking about the mainstream power channel of culture. The symbols that group is throwing away. The people on the side that want to fashion their own self, contrary to that main channel, are picking up those symbols and putting them on themselves. And in doing so, they're drawing attention to themselves from the power channel, and in that way, they're accruing to themselves a bit of power also, because they're causing people to pay attention to them. So now, if you really want this to happen, why don't you start wearing swastikas, or anything that has to do with the Ku Klux Klan, and you'll see that the dynamic I'm talking about right now is still very much at play in our culture. So that would be one way to self-fashion yourself. The other way would be to, I say this as only if there are 2 or 3 ways, but I want to talk primarily about ways that will be representative of the other methods. So in order to, keep the scope of this video manageable, I'm just going to talk about a few. Let's talk about the scrapbooking method of self-fashioning. Now, what that means is, you realize that the notion of yourself, if you keep it in here, may change, may slip through as the water of a river passes by. Your own memories, because when you think of yourself, you're really accessing, when you reflect upon yourself, right? You're accessing the memories you have of your recent and past contexts, and memories of yourself, and that forms the notion of this mental picture of you that you are looking at. What happens if those memories are damaged, or if they're lost? So people sense, because of the fluidity of the self itself, that it's so hard to get a handle of, that if you can somehow capture representations of it and put it outside of you in the form of a paper, or a picture, or a digital collage, or whatnot. I'm talking about, let's think of the old type of scrapbooking, where you capture these old photos of yourself or your family, and you work them around, and you work sort of a visual history out. Now, this would also happen in the old-fashioned ways of journaling. To write a journal, a daily entry of what happened in your life, would be a way to capture it outside of your actual the mind, the wetware that might break down or change. And it gives you a sense of stability and solidity as far as who you are. Now, let me say, if you're involved in a Facebook page, or a personal blog, or not, that doesn't even have to be about your life, but if it's about your views about something, then implicitly and indirectly it is still about you, and it's capturing you, your values and beliefs, as you apply them to certain topics. If you're into video logging, or the old-fashioned scrapbooks, but even something as apparently innocuous as a Facebook page is evidence that you're doing this, and that you sense this is important. Okay, so it's a capturing of the self outside of this actual body that you sort of sense escapes the deterioration of the body, and it stabilizes itself. Okay, now ironically, here's another way to do this. Because all of this involves somewhat of a contradiction. And the contradiction is this. If you are going to examine you, so let's say you, prime, are going to examine you, the subject, can you really do that? Because as soon as you start to examine you, you have removed yourself from yourself to examine yourself. Let's call that you prime. And who is examining you prime? Oh, well, now you need a you double prime to examine you prime. But who's going to examine you double prime? Now you need a you triple prime, and so forth ad infinitum. So the whole notion of I examine myself is actually contradictory. So, and we sort of understand that. We understand that as an impossible activity. And that leaves us with a black box called ourselves that we can never know. All right, the heart then, or the mind, is completely blackened to us. We don't know what's really inside it. We only see what comes out of it, and that kind of scares us. So people that don't know how to escape that, or don't want to try to escape that, may often just say, here's my way of doing it, I'm giving up altogether. And they begin to end up not actually caring what they look like, or caring how other people perceive them. And they settle for a common denominator, and that common denominator is usually their own ambitions or desires for that moment. So they're going to be caught up in whatever idea has captured them for that moment, and they really have no concern about how far it's going to go or what people are thinking about them as they do this. And it can show up in a physical manifestation. Maybe they have given up on some high level of personal hygiene. Maybe they don't care too much about their clothes or whatnot. And this, in fact, is a sort of a giving up on the whole notion by recognizing its impossibility, the genuine impossibility of, in fact, self-fashioning. All right. So this would be the Homer Simpson model. Now, of Brian Ott's essay, I'm Bart Simpson, Who the Hell Are You?, found in the Journal of Popular Culture. The thing about the Homer Simpson model is you can have two Homer Simpsons, right? You can have the Homer Simpson who doesn't know what he's doing, but he does it anyway. He does what I just described. He's the unconscious postmodernist. Not unconscious. He's the unaware postmodernist. But then you have the one who knows why he's doing what he's doing. And that's the more entrenched Homer Simpson, and it perhaps is the lowest, the deepest, the most advanced protest against the notions of trying to deal with yourself. And those are very, very aware. They're aware of what they're doing, but they also are aware of the futility of trying to do something else in the postmodern mindset. Now, in all of these videos, we haven't discussed the possible ways to escape the postmodern mindset, but in that sense, they are as deep as it goes.